So I want to switch gears here, Ashish. I'm always curious about people's career journeys also, right? So we covered the trends and the business side of it. But if I were to ask you to rewind all the way back to Ashish in high school, right? Or, in your childhood, were there was there a special moment or something from your childhood that kind of set the direction of the type of leader that you are now? And what would that be?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, this days back, almost 30 plus years now.
Mm.
Um, in my childhood days, obviously I grew up in India, as I said, with a lot of my cousins around me. I mean, but I, I always had a bent of mind on solving problems. I always had, like, I remember early on in there were small mixies, where
What is that?
like a small mix, like a mixing equipment that you use at home, and that one day got bad, and I just asked my mom, "Hey, can I just open that up and see what has gone wrong?" So I was always curious and inquisitive of why machines fail and how you can fix, and that bent of mind of I call solving problems took me to an engineering school and then on to into an IT world or technology world. Because in the end, technology world or whether it is an engineering world, it's the same bent of mind that you should have is which is how are like you need to be obsessed with defining what the problem is, as I mentioned, and solving those problems. Now, as you go up higher in the leadership, you can potentially you can have your team solve those problems. But even as a senior leader, I feel you should be inquisitive about problems because I mean, as a senior leader, I feel as a CIO or senior most technology executive, your worth is definitely measured in what value you bring, but also how your organization is portrayed in solving problems, whether they are business problems and mostly business problems. So that's how I took my journey from being, I call a small, fixing small equipments at home. I remember days when my friend, a computer was pretty new, and my friends used to bring and open up the computer towers, and they used to look at how what went wrong. I mean, I never bent into that because my bent was more towards mechanical equipments, which is why. But again, it's the same thing. Is those are the same. Is having that inquisitiveness of understanding the problem is so critical when you are growing up, and you challenge your brain because in the end you try and understand how these machines work, whether it is those mechanical equipments, whether it is PCs of 1980s and 90s, whether it is robots of today or AI machines of tomorrow.
Yeah, I so resonate with that because we talked about this. Like we're both came from an engineering background, and yours is mechanical. I love civil, right? I love buildings. It's always like, how did they do that, right? How did they create that machine? But in my case, it's like, how did they build that bridge? How did they do this high rise? We're on the 53rd floor of this building here. Like, how did they get all these things erected and constructed, right? And yeah, I think that insatiable curiosity, I think, drives a lot of technologists, right? Like, how'd they do that? And why did this happen? Right? Yeah. Um, well, you mentioned all these different kind of careers you had, right? You obviously had a huge progression. A lot of our viewers, we have the whole gamut, right? From college grads watching to mid-level, but I see a huge struggle for kind of mid-level technologists, right? Where they're like manager, director, and they're struggling to get to VP or even the C-suite, right? And it's a whole different set of skills, right? But what do you think it takes to get from that mid-level to more of that senior executive level in technology?
Yeah. So I think, as you said, my journey has been from, I always say I used to program in my early days of my career to leading teams and organizations, right? All throughout my life, I've always followed a principle I call, which is, we used to call back in Procter and Gamble days, the PI principle, which is there are three factors that you always have to have to look at. One is performance, I stands for image, and E stands for exposure.
Oh,
Uh,
PIE, PIE.
Pi,
Got it.
yeah. Now, what does this mean actually? So, whether you are a mid-level manager or whether you are an early contributor, individual contributor, even at our level, right, at a senior level, performance is something that we own when we drive.
100%.
So it's up to us to drive that performance, whether it is you as an individual contributor, as a team leader. Uh, Image is something that we create. An image is always created by experiences that we provide to our, I call customers, to our partners, to our supporting organizations within a broader technology organization. And that becomes very critical. I mean, that is the key to your brand image, is how are you, what is your or my image about
In marketing,
in
it's
marketing,
branding.
it's branding, exactly. And
Yeah.
exposure is something I call is, how do you, I mean, the exposure to the senior leaderships and senior leadership level. Because senior leadership level is always looking at people, the next set of leaders I call, which is how do they think? Because it's all about thinking, I mean, strategically, how are we thinking and how are we driving strategies? Because in the end, as you go higher up, I mean, ultimately a leader is setting up strategies and driving them through their organizations to achieve those key result areas, goals, KPIs, whatever are there. So these three, I call PI principles, are so critical in making sure that that and there are no guarantees again, but these are the things that I stand by my principle every time when I look at myself. Is my performance up to mark? Is my do I have I created a good experience and good image? Because if I create a good image and my organization creates a good image with my customers and with my supporting organization, they're going to come. It's a repeat customers that they're going to come back to me. And then exposure is the way you work with your leaders and or cross like business leaders and how they think about you. Are you the right person to drive this organization to the next level?
I think that's so important what you just said, right? Performance, image, and exposure. Because I think too often people concentrate just on performance, right? I did a good job, so I should get a promotion, right? And then they checked off all their work. They met deadlines and then they did their work, right? And then I think, especially for technologists, sometimes we struggle with being an introvert, or we don't want to feel like we're showing off because we might seem like we're bragging if we're exposed too much, or like, but I think what you said about image and exposure is so important, because if you're not visible, even if you do the best work, nobody knows it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And that's why that image is so important and exposure is so important, because image.
What would be an example of cultivating an image?
So delivering on, I mean, consistently delivering on the goals that that you and your team have set up. Now, oftentimes the goals are not just our goals of the organization or my goals. Some of my goals are supporting somebody else's organization. So it's in a matrixed organization. Typically, you would have organizational goals that support different organizational goals. So if you and your team consistently deliver on those goals, then your supporting organization, because they're your
Makes other
customer too.
departments look good,
Absolutely.
right?
They I mean, you make your peer and your peer's organization look good. Because in the end, you as a leader also don't want, I mean, ultimately we are under the same umbrella of technology organization. You don't want your peer organization to fail because of you and your organization. And they look good because of you. And it's so critical, and that's what creates an image in my opinion. And image turns into a brand, because once you deliver and you consistently deliver on your goals or your commitments, people recognize, oh, this is Ashish and his team. They're always going to deliver,
Yeah.
no matter what.
You're building trust
And
too,
building the trust. In the end, it's the trust that matters.
right? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, when we were researching and talking before this, you kind of talked about this importance of having cross-functional knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Don't specialize too early. Can you go deeper into that and expand on that for our
Yeah.
audience?
So early on in your career, or anybody's career, I would say, and I tell this to my son who just graduated from college, is you always have to have a broad vision. You always have to gather experiences, because experiences don't come by sitting and watching on the sidelines. Experiences come by actually doing that work, being in their shoes. Whether I am in a shoes of a salesperson, or I'm in a shoe of a supply chain person. I'm just making up. I mean, the reason I took that Minneapolis assignment, and I know I was moving from a Cincinnati, which was a temperate climate, to a very cold climate in
I'm
Minneapolis.
gonna say, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, that wasn't sacrifice, but I will tell you, the best assignment of my life was that assignment that gave me a peaks, or I call a bird's eye view on how sales leaders of big organizations think and drive. Because I was a direct report of a sales VP who had a responsibility to drive a $3 billion business for Procter and Gamble with Target. So my, again, coming back, is you want to have a broad experience early on, so that you can then decide, these are the areas. Now I'm giving examples of working with business, but also in technology. I mean, yeah, you can implement ERPs, like that's an experience. You can run cybersecurity. You can be part of cybersecurity organization. You can be part of infrastructure organization. I mean, these are so core critical capabilities that you're going to learn, that I would say is so critical as you grow up, because then these skills and these experiences are going to come handy when a person reaches, I call, a C-suite role. Because in the end, a C-suite role is not just an expert of one area. He or she has a broad knowledge base of whatever the area is, whether it is technology, whether it is running an HR or human resources, whether it is running supply chain. Like in supply chain, I always say you can run and be part of manufacturing organizations, you can be part of planning organizations, procurement organizations, quality organizations. Those are the areas for them. But for us, for in technology, it's all about infrastructure, cybersecurity, business engagements, project deliveries like ERP deliveries. These are the skills that I will always say, broaden them, so you get as much exposure you can. And at some point, you decide to either be a specialist of an area,
Right.
and if you happen to become a C-suite executive, these experiences will come back handy for you.
Yeah. You're almost I had one CIO on our podcast, and Trudy Van Horn, she was just saying you almost become an orchestrator, right? Like you move up by learning all these different functions, but then when you're kind of at the executive level, then you got to orchestrate it all and make sure they all fit, and
Exactly.
drive revenue, decrease costs, all of that.
Exactly. I mean, I call them as the symphony. In the orchestra, right?
Yeah.
The one who is guiding all the people playing different instruments,
Yeah.
and that's what organizations are. Right? You will have organizations playing different instruments and doing different things, as you mentioned.
For sure. For sure. Now I know you're very passionate about kind of giving back to the next generation of leaders. Um, what are some of the mentoring tips that you've kind of given to others? Like, if think of that person out there on the podcast right now, maybe they're stuck in their tech careers, right? What would be some mentoring advice you would offer to
Yeah.
them?
The mentoring advice I always offer to people is understand your situation, because that is so critical to understand what the situation is. Not every situation is similar, I always say, because there are factors that could be internal to me as a person, or that could be factors external to me as a person, and that is organization. But understanding and having a deep understanding of what are your true values, what are your true experiences, and what do you bring to the table versus what is organization is looking for. Some organizations typically look for, and it depends on your level and role, but as I said, delivery. I mean, delivering consistently on your goals is something every organization looks at. So making sure that you are delivering on your goals. There has to be no gap left when you're delivering on the roles, which is where I go back to my pie analogy where performance comes in play.
Well,
And
that takes like a lot of almost like self-introspection
yeah,
and self-awareness, right? Because what if we don't know our own
and
weaknesses yet, or we're not experienced enough to really know what the organization wants? Any
and this
advice
is
around that?
yes, this is why you need mentors and sponsors, whether they are, and most probably whether they are in the company, it's even better because these are the folks who are at a senior level than you are, who know the lay of the land, who know how the organizations work, who know how you fit into that organization or you don't fit into that organization, and they give you the guidance. So building those mentorship and sponsorship. Now, I always say mentors. I mean, mentors can be. I mean, you can ask for a mentor, and I can be a mentor of 5 people or 2 people, whatever that is. But sponsorship is something that is earned, and sponsorships are rare but not impossible, because in the end, again, going back, when you have done things consistently for a person or a set of people, that's when you build that relationship that that was a mentoring relationship early on, which turns into a sponsorship relationship.
Yeah, for sure. It makes such a difference, right? Because we can't see what we don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially if we're more junior, right, in our role. Um, I mean, you and I have talked about it. We both have, kind of kids that are we have sophomores in high school, as well as you have a son that's graduated. I have a daughter, a freshman in college. Um, and I worry a bit about what role they're going to play, right? With AI being able to kind of encompass a lot of entry level functions. What happens to our generation of college grads,
Yeah.
right? What are your thoughts about that? Like, what do we
I
tell
think
these college grads?
absolutely. I mean, I think the same thing I said earlier is um, AI is not going to take all jobs. Humans are still going to be there. I tell the same thing to I call now a sophomore in high school is don't be afraid of AI. Embrace AI and leverage AI tools for your work, but don't lose your creativity, because that creativity and individual skill, that is something that a person brings to the table. And I don't think AI is there yet to replace creativity. Yes, I mean you can instruct an AI application to do what you want to do, but an AI application is not going to instantly create stuff on its own. And that individual creativity, individual skills are so critical now. It could be, I mean, simple skills like your math skills are good. Some people are good at, I call speaking. I mean, you'll find them in debate clubs and all that. I mean, these are core skills. Those core skills you should continue to hone when you're in school and or even going beyond. Like, I mean, I remember I had a fear of speaking on stage. Now, as you grow through your experiences in your career, that, you forcefully you put yourselves in those situations where you are on stage, and now that fear is gone. So coming back, I always say don't fear new tools. Today, I mean, few years ago it was analytics. Now it's AI. These are new tools that are going to come, and it could be something else 5 years down the line. But I always say that humanity is going to be there until you think critically and you keep your individual strengths and take help of these tools to better them.
I so agree with that. And I'm glad you brought up creativity, right? Like creativity, communications, right? Critical thinking. I think those things, even last weekend, I went to a marching band competition
Mm-hmm.
for our son, right? And just every 15 minutes, a different high school was doing marching band formations and playing their instruments, and it brought me back to how important like music and creativity and the arts is also, right? Like in our digital world, just keep on scrolling. I think that's definitely something that, and it I don't know, it was very fulfilling watching kids perform again and doing something creative, right? So that's
And
something.
I'll tell you, in business world too, creativity does help. And actually, that's a differentiator between a person who is, and I'm not saying that creativity is just in art and like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
I'm
Even
solving
just thinking out of the box,
exactly
right?
thinking out of the box. Like we are solving a business problem, and thinking differently is something that most leaders value, because in the end, we are there, or the whole team is there collectively to solve a business problem that business is facing at that point in time. And it could be that they are trying to improve their sales, or they are trying to take a look at how to optimize their cost. Again, I go back to those two main examples, but it is so important that that creativity, or that inquisitiveness, as I mentioned early on, is so critical. And that's why I keep telling my daughter is that don't fear these things. Leverage them
Right.
to make better use of how they can help you and and people of her age, right?